The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. Before we get started, I would just like to make sure that everybody can hear us okay. And the way that we can tell that you can hear is if you can please just raise your hand icon. Okay, perfect. Thank you. There's a lot of hands, so if you guys could just lower your hands before we get started so then we won't think you're trying to speak, that would be helpful. Thank you. Okay. Well, welcome and thank you for attending the joint stakeholder meeting for the State Board of Addiction Counselor Examiners, the State Board of Marriage and Family Therapist Examiners, State Board of Licensed Professional Counselor Examiners, State Board of Psychologist Examiners, State Board of Unlicensed Psychotherapists, and State Board of Social Work Examiners via webinar today. Before we get started, we would like to introduce the staff members from the division that are present. My name is Elena Kemp, and I'm a regulatory coordinator with the division. Also attending is Karen McGovern. She's the Deputy Division Director of Legal Affairs. We have Laura Bravo. She is a policy analyst. We have Wendy Anderson. She is an interim program director. We also have a couple of other program directors. Dimitri Kunin is the program director, and we have a senior program director, Sam Dwelp, on the line with us as well. And we'll be facilitating the stakeholder meeting. So in compliance with the governor's orders regarding COVID-19, the division has transitioned to a platform that is 100% virtual, and we appreciate your flexibility. As many of you have been to DORA stakeholder meetings before, we would like to reiterate the importance of your comments today. DORA makes decisions every day that may affect your life and your business. Your input is vital in the rulemaking process. Throughout this process, our goal is to create regulations that clarify and explain legislation, ensure minimum competency to enter and continue to practice, and provide only what is absolutely necessary for consumer protection without creating unnecessary barriers to the marketplace. Your input will be part of the information that goes back to the boards as they consider adopting revisions to the rules related to the applications and the implementation of Colorado House Bill 2013-26, House Bill 2012-06, and Senate Bill 2102. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted on the website at a later date, or on all of the websites at a later date. As the stakeholder meeting is being held solely via webinar, please raise your hand by using the hand icon if you would like to speak, and we will unmute your line so you can be heard by everyone. Or you can type your comment or question into the question section and we will read it aloud. Before we start taking comments, I do want to ask that everybody providing comments to please state your name and who you represent, if any. Feel free to provide either general comments on the rule changes or specific comments on the proposed language. We have hundreds of participants today, so please limit your comments to no more than 3 to 5 minutes. Try not to repeat something that was already said. Stating you're in full agreement with someone else works just fine, and it will be noted. For a clear record, and to ensure that we cover all involved mental health professions, we will first note the changes in the bill that relate to all the mental health professions. Then we will note the bill's revisions for each profession in alphabetical order. Requesting comment on the specific set of the draft rules after we discuss the bill revisions for each profession. So just a couple of housekeeping matters. If you are using audio through your computer, please remember to put your phones on vibrate or turn them off. And whether or not you're using computer or phone audio, try to keep background noises to a minimum when speaking. So before we start taking comments, Karen McGovern, if you would like to address the audience on some of the discussions that we'll be having today.
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you all for attending. We have a lot to get through, and as Elena said, we have a lot of stakeholders signed in. So in order to make sure that we can take everyone's comments and make sure that we get this done in an orderly fashion, I'm going to just talk about first a couple of bills that impact all of the 6 mental health professions. The first bill is Senate Bill 20102. That's the provider disclosure to patients regarding formal actions based on sexual misconduct. In this bill, beginning March 1st of 2021, all healthcare providers subject to the Medical Transparency Act of 2010, which includes all licensees of all 6 mental health boards, are required to provide written disclosures to patients of any final convictions or pleas for a sex offense and any final disciplinary actions due to a conviction or pleas of a sex offense or findings of unprofessional conduct related to sexual misconduct. The bill further states that failure to comply with the requirements constitute unprofessional conduct. So you will see changes regarding this bill in all of the proposed rules for each mental health board. The next bill that impacts all of the mental health boards is House Bill 2013-26, creating Occupational Credential Portability Program. This bill takes effect January 1st, 2021, and directs the regulators for the affected professions and occupations to implement the program in the least burdensome way necessary to protect the public. This law also allows military spouses to obtain at no cost a 3-year temporary credential for any profession or occupation under the purview of the division if they hold a credential in good standing from another jurisdiction. So this bill in essence will affect the endorsement rules for each profession and then has that extra piece that allows military spouses to obtain a temporary credential. And then last, we have House Bill 2012-06, which is the sunset for mental health professions. So this is a long and somewhat complex bill. So I want to start by highlighting some of the general changes to the law, the changes that affect applicants and licensees of all 6 mental health boards. Once I've done that, then we will start going through each individual board in alphabetical order. And after I highlight the changes to the law for that profession, that the professions regulated by that board, then we will put the rules up on the screen and we'll start taking comments regarding and feedback on those proposed rules. Once we finish with that profession, then we'll move on to the next one. So here are the general changes from House Bill 1206 that will affect all of the mental health boards. It modifies the mandatory disclosure requirements to include a disclosure that medical records may not be maintained after 7 years. The bill expands and updates title protection for mental health professionals. The bill clarifies prohibited activities, specifically to include any crime related to the practice of a mental health profession, and to include offering or giving commissions, rebates, or other remuneration unless it is for services provided. And that includes marketing, office space, administrative, consultative, and clinical services, and not the referral itself. The bill clarifies that any contract entered into by a mental health professional for marketing, office space, or administrative support shall not provide remuneration for referrals or create any other financial benefit. It clarifies that the professional service corporation requirements. It clarifies the mental health regulatory boards, so any of the 6 mental health boards' ability to suspend a licensee's certification, license, or registration for failure to comply with a board-ordered mental or physical health examination. The bill creates a mental health disciplinary record work group to make recommendations regarding records that impact the initial licensure, certification, and registration, and ongoing practice of individuals applying or licensed by one of the mental health boards. It clarifies that mental health professionals may administer opiate antagonists and that they are provided immunity when administering the opiate antagonist in certain circumstances. The bill clarifies that exemptions from Article 245 include students practicing in a school program and a professional practicing auricular acudetox in accordance with 12-245-233. And it clarifies the disclosure of confidential communications. Okay, so those are the provisions that affect all of the mental health boards, and now we're going to start with addiction counselors. So in addition to all of those things I talked about, the bill addresses addiction counselors by creating addiction counselor candidate registration. It modifies the requirements for licensure and certification for addiction counselors, including the examination requirements, replacing the certification levels for addiction counselors with certified addiction technicians and certified addiction specialists. The bill clarifies the education, training requirements, and scopes of practice for addiction counselors, specifically requiring the State Board of Human Services and the Department of Human Services to establish education requirements for addiction counselors. It defines clinical supervision and requirements, as well as the mode of supervision. So you'll see in this bill that virtual and telesupervision are included. And it shifts the rulemaking authority for continued competency for addiction counselors to the Office of Behavioral Health in the Department of Human Services. So why don't we take a look now at the addiction counselor rules, and anyone who has a comment on that, I'll turn it over to you, Elena, to call for comments on the addiction counselor rules.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. So once again, Laura, you might be able to help with this as well. But once again, if you do have comments on these rules and you would like to speak, just go ahead and raise your hand and we will unmute your line.
Hi, Elena. Yep, I can help look for people who have their hands raised. So I see there are a few. We have, as you noted, several hundred people, so it might take me a while to find you, but I will, have no fear. Here's one. I have a Peter Barber. Your line is unmuted. Peter Barber.
Sorry, I thought I had lowered my hand. I didn't have it raised anymore, so
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. No worries. I will go ahead and mute your line and call on somebody else. Thank you. Patricia Jackson.
Hi. Thank you for taking my question. So I am a CAC3, so just point of clarification, instead of being called a certified addiction counselor level 3, I would now be a certified addiction specialist. Is that correct?
That is correct, ma'am.
And are we dropping the Roman numeral 3 then?
Yes.
Okay. And then my other question is, so we're up for recertification of our credential the end of August. When do these changes for ongoing CEUs, will they affect this next recertification coming up in a month?
That's something that we'd have to defer on and get back to you. So I'm happy to, I'll provide you with an email address and you can shoot your questions to me and I can get back to you.
Perfect. And I'm sorry, who is speaking? Who is speaking? Who was speaking?
Karen McGovern.
Perfect. Thank you, Karen.
Okay, thank you for your comment, Patricia. Nancy Vaughn. You're self-muted, Nancy. Oh, your hand went down, so I'm assuming that means you don't need to speak anymore. So, 1 second. Nita Johnson, I see your hand is raised. You have several logins. I'm going to try and unmute the one that you're on.
I'm
Can you hear
yeah.
us? Oh,
Can you?
Yep. Hello. You're good to speak.
Hi. So I have a question because we were part of this whole process. And so my question is, when will DORA start enforcing it? Because we have a problem right at the moment in that the applications have already, the applications have changed on the website, but we don't have everything in place yet, right? We don't have the classes at OBH yet. We don't have everything in place yet at DORA, but the applications are kind of locking people out at the moment. And so so we are needing from DORA a date as to when this is going to go into effect, and you're essentially going to close the door. So will you close the door January 1st, August 31st, or what is it looking like right at the moment? And for the other lady, recertification is not until 2021. It's not in a month. It's next year.
So, Jackie, are you on the line?
I don't see Jackie on the line.
Yeah, and I a couple other questions. So if we enter questions into the question box, will you guys answer them even if it's not on this line on this call?
Sure, and I'm happy to answer your questions. I will point out that the bill went into effect upon signature.
Right.
And so that was on July 14th, which is why we have changed our application to comply with the law. But as far as the other information, I'm happy to get back to you.
Okay, because there's that question, because normally in the past when we did rule change in 2011, we were given 6 months, I believe, where people that were in the middle of process were able to turn in their applications. So
sure,
because they didn't
I
have
understand that.
and they didn't have warning about that, right? And then I had one other question. That's just more a procedural question. So previously we had 1,000 hours that for Tech 1s because they have to start their registration with DORA. And we would like to see that for the technician as well. Since that's a process we've had ongoing, that we would have that continue. So those were my two big questions.
Okay, and I appreciate that and appreciate your questions. So I think that we can, certainly get back to you on those questions.
Okay.
I know that sometimes when bills go into effect, sometimes, for instance, when I talked about earlier the Senate Bill 2102, the disclosures aren't required to be made until March. And in the other bill, 1326, the effective date is January. Unfortunately, with the mental health sunset bill, the legislature made it go into effect upon signature. So I think that's why, there's the rush and not the normal, 3-6 month period to get things in order. But I definitely will check into your questions so we can best accommodate you.
Well, we have quite a few people in the field because we're getting a ton of calls. So it would be really helpful to have a window in which people have time. Because the other problem we have is that the applications require new courses, and those 4 courses haven't been developed yet because we were waiting for the law to go into effect. So that's the other problem.
Okay. Do you have any other further comments, Karen, or should we move on to the next?
I think we can move on to the next, and I will get back to you.
Okay, thank you. It looks like Jackie is on the line. She's an attendee. I can't figure out how to move her over to be a presenter. Did you want her to clarify anything? If you do, just let me know,
No,
and I can unmute her line. Okay. Oh, there. I think I figured it out. Technology. All right. So I'm going to start back up at the top. Erin Hill, you are self-muted, but I have unmuted your line. Erin Hill.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So I had a couple questions about the continuing education for addition counselors. With that being moved over to OBH versus DORA, will we have to submit to OBH for a continuing education, or will that still go to DORA and then DORA will send that to OBH? That makes sense?
It does make sense, and I do I want to go ahead and try to answer your question here. As you've heard, some of the rules aren't in place over in OBH, so some of those questions can't be answered today, but will definitely be fleshed out. But I think that, so that's the answer to your question right now is we don't know right now because we still have to flesh that out with OBH. This rule, again, went into effect the day it was signed, and so we're scrambling to try to get the pieces in place as quickly as possible, and we will definitely have more outreach for you. But I do want to remind everyone that really this stakeholder meeting, we need to focus on the rules because those are the things we need to get in place. So if we can focus on providing feedback on the draft rules that were provided, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
And so I don't know
Anything
if that
further?
this next question falls under that same thing or not, about rules or not, but if exempt facilities will remain exempt, so community mental health centers, if those will remain exempt facilities like they are currently.
And is that question about continued competency?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So again, that will be something that's regulated by OBH and it will be determined by their rules. So I don't believe there's an answer, but we can certainly try to get back to you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Hey, Karen, this is Jackie. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, just making sure. So yeah, Karen is correct. We do not regulate the exempt facilities, or nor do we come up with that list. So that is definitely something that's provided by the Office of Behavioral Health. So that's something that they would have to ensure that was current.
Great. Thank you for that, Jackie. All right. I'm going to move on to the next person with their hand raised. Andrea Kleeman, you are self-muted, but I've unmuted your line. If you'd like to speak, please unmute your computer or your phone. Andrea Kleeman. Oh, your hand went down, so I'm assuming that means that you no longer want to speak. And then move on to the next person. Feel free again to raise your hand now if you change your mind. Bonetta Cruz, your hand is raised. I've unmuted your line. Looks like you were self-muted. Bonetta Cruz.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead. I apologize I mispronounced your name though, but go ahead.
Okay, you did great with it. Thank you very much. I'm a CAC2 here in Pueblo, Colorado. I was a CAC2, I guess I could say. So I was looking over what we were able to do. So no longer will I would be able to carry a caseload. I wouldn't be able to do individual counseling, or would I have to, would my documentation need to be signed off on by a specialist, or how would that look in terms of individual counseling and carrying caseloads within a treatment program, or would it be more just case management?
And so can you point me to what rule you're referencing?
In the Act on what duties the technicians would be able to complete, it is.
Oh, no. It's okay. You're not referencing a rule. You're talking about the bill. And so I think maybe what you're saying is perhaps the board could look at clarifying in rule what your scope could include.
Right, because that's because it didn't include individual counseling. Only the specialist would be able to do individual, like, substance treatment for substance use disorders. whereas technicians would not be able to do that. They would be only discharge planning, case management, coordination of care, skill-based education, whereas, or no, not even treatment planning would a technician be able to do. But
Okay,
yeah,
so that's something that we can ask the board to look at and clarify.
Yeah, because that's going to be hard for twos, because we operate pretty autonomously, without, signing off on documentation, and we carry caseloads. Yeah, so that's going to need some, pretty.
Okay, definitely we'll add a note to look at adding some clarity there. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right. The next person I see is, hold on, my screen is scrolling automatically, bear with me. Bob Lang, I see you sent a question and then you have your hand raised. I'm gonna just go ahead and unmute you and you can ask your question. Nope, your hand went down. Your question though looks like yours, yep, there we go. If you unmute your line, Bob, you can speak. Your question that you emailed or that you sent in the chat was, will there be a grandfather clause for current CAC 2 and CAC 3, and what would that look like? Again, if you'd like to clarify that comment at all, Bob, you're unmuted right now on our end. You just have to unmute your line on your computer or your phone and you can speak. But otherwise, it sounds like you're asking regarding grandfather clauses for CAC 2s and CAC 3s.
Yeah, and from my understanding of reading the bill, it looks like it's a combination of those two. And generally, when these types of rules take place, there's a grandfather clause for individuals who have a CAC 1 or a CAC 2 to kind of either be designated as a licensed, as a certified addiction specialist or a certified addictions technician. I didn't see anything in the bill that outlined a grandfather clause for those individuals who currently have a CAC 2 or a CAC 3.
Okay, that's something that we can have the board look at.
Did you have anything else to add, Bob?
No, that's it. Thank you very much.
Sure, thank you. All right, let me find another person who would like to speak. We have Bridget Ballard Cummins. Bridget, go ahead. Bridget, your line is unmuted. It looks like you should be able to speak. Bridget? Okay, must be having technical difficulties. We'll come back. Bryce Jennings, your line is unmuted.
Oh, hi. My hand was supposed to be down. Sorry.
Oh, okay. No worries. We will go ahead and mute your line. Thank you. All right. Next, I see Michael Ruttenberg. Michael, your line is unmuted on our end, but you are self-muted. If you'd like to speak, go ahead and unmute yourself. Michael? Michael Ruttenberg. Okay, I'm not hearing anything. You might want to check your microphone to make sure the volume is set correctly. Michael? Okay, we'll come back to you as well. Feel free also, if we're having trouble with your audio, to send a comment and we'll try and get that read here shortly. Melissa McConnell, you're unmuted.
So I have a couple questions. So what happens with the people that have been, who have applied for their CAC2 and are waiting for approval and have not yet got that? Do they need to go ahead and get the bachelor's then? And then according to Dora, my licensure has already changed over to a CAS from the CAC2. So what does that mean for supervision?
So those are good questions, and those are things that we can put on here for the board to consider when they're doing their rulemaking.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let me keep looking for another person. Bear with me. Rebecca Wallish. Hold on. Hope your hand just went down.
I do have a question.
Oh, you're good. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, yeah, my
No worries.
I'm an LAC, and I had a couple of questions, and I apologize in advance if one of them might be a repeat. I was with the clients and came in just a few minutes late. But one, will monthly supervision hours change? I don't know if I was able to read that, if it was in the rules or in the law already.
We can put that in for the board. We can put that in for the board to consider. We're at this point, we're just taking feedback on the rules that have been provided. If you have questions, you can type them in and we can get back to you after the meeting. But as of this point, we have over 380 people online, so we really want to focus on taking feedback on these rules.
Okay, well,
so we can get that information to the board.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't sure if it applied or not, just because, I mean, that's important for people who are seeking out supervision. And the other question was already answered, which was if there's anything that's in place for people who have applied and were already denied by 1 or 2 days because they did not have a bachelor's. So it sounds like that's also in being taken into consideration.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So when will that be communicated?
The boards, the boards meet. I would have to look. I'd have to switch screens here, but I will take a look at when addiction counselors next meet. And when they next meet, they're going to look at the rules and go through the stakeholder comments. And then please feel free to jump on the website and look at the FAQs. And we add to that as new information is provided every day.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. Robin Jameson, I've unmuted your line. You are self-muted. Would you like to speak? If so, your hand went down. Okay. Terry Hurst, your hand is raised. Looks like you're self-muted. Terry? Terry Hurst? We can come back to you. All right, Tanya Goebel. Apologize, I pronounced that wrong. Tanya.
I'm here.
All right, go ahead.
So my question is for CAC2s who have been practicing for a couple of years and they do not have their bachelor's yet, are they going to, as long as they are continually going to school, be able to practice?
Okay. I think we can add that for the board to consider.
Okay, and then my other question is, because it says in the health-related field, I was originally getting my bachelor's in biblical studies. Do I need to go ahead and change that over and get all of my stuff switched over to a behavioral health field, or will they still accept my spiritual side as part of behavioral health?
Okay, and that's something that we can add in for feedback for the board.
Okay, so you guys are unsure yet when a bachelor's will have to be put in?
So again, the board makes the rules for this board, and what we're here today is to get feedback and questions so that we can present those to the board so they can make determinations.
Okay, because like I said, some of us have been in this field for a while, so I'd really like to make that comment of we are working towards our bachelor's, and if we lose everything we've been working for and the ability to be able to practice, I think it kind of takes us a little bit out of the game.
Thank you, and I appreciate that feedback, and we'll make sure to relay that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Shannon Gunnan. I've unmuted your line. You're still self-muted. Shannon, if you'd like to speak, go ahead and.
Thanks.
There you go.
So as feedback, I noticed this in another license, in a registered psychotherapist license, it looks like there's a 5-year grace period for people in order to do something so they become licensed. I'm curious, I'd like to give feedback that in the addiction specialist arena, or in those, if there could be also that kind of a window for people who don't have a bachelor's could get their bachelor's, or if they have a master's, they can seek a master's degree in another field. They continue to pursue this. Some of the people I'm working with have already spent lots of money in taking exams and spending money for supervision and hours and pursuing like the CAC2 credential. And right at this moment, he went to apply and he was denied his CAC2, even though he's put in all that time and money and effort. And it kind of shut him down. So I don't know if there's a way for the board to give a greater grace period for folks who are in that position to be able to obtain the education needed in order to continue working in that field.
Okay, and that, again, I really appreciate that, and that's something we can put to the board to consider.
Thank you.
But just flagging, making sure that everyone also understands that the board's rules are made within the statutory guidelines, and so we'll have to look and see what the law says, and then the board can look and see if that's something they can accommodate.
That'd be great.
Okay, thank you. Karen, on that note, we got a comment from Hannah Dudley. She says, I think most of us thought we were discussing the bill. How are the rules you're wanting us to focus our questions on different from the bill? I don't know if you'd like to clarify that for folks again.
So the bill, the bill or the statute was signed into law by the governor. Once that the bill becomes law, then the board has to go through and make revisions to their current rules so that they're in compliance with the new law. And if you look at the rules were sent out to the stakeholders with the notice, and they're also up on the screen. You can see that the changes made to the rules are in red line or a different color of text. And you can see that those are the changes that were made, and we can address those rules. Not everything that's in the bill or the law is addressed in the rules, because not everything requires rules. Rules are typically made to clarify the law, if that makes sense. And if it doesn't, feel free to chat back, and I can try to go into more detail.
Thank you, Karen. Hannah messaged and said that is very helpful. So thank you for clarifying that. Okay. All right. So let me find another person with their hand raised. Bear with me. Kevin Franciato. I apologize for your last name that I probably mispronounced. Kevin, your line is muted. Oh, there you go. You can go ahead and speak.
Right, all right. It's Franciati.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time to have this call. The comments that I wanted to make were regarding out-of-state credentialing and reciprocity, and would just strongly like to see a far more streamlined process, as well as including part of the national examination requirements ought to not be restricted to NADAC. And there are many other types of accredited examinations that are on the national level that ought to be recognized. For example, the ICNRC alcohol and drug counselor examination. My comments, and I had a question, but in the interest of the point of this call being about comments, I will limit it to that.
Thank you for that. All right. Move on to the next person. Linda Johnson. Linda, you're self-muted still. Linda Johnson, if you'd like to speak, go ahead and unmute your line. Your hand went down, so I assume you're okay for now. Feel free again to raise your hand or send a message if you'd like to pass anything along to the board. Sandy McFall. Sandy? Sandy McFall. Sandy? Looks like your line is unmuted. I'm not sure if you can check the volume or if your speakers are working. Okay, your hand went down. Sarah Milmo. Apologies on the last name. Sarah?
It's Milmo.
Okay.
So my question has to do with the new disclosure statement requirements, and I'm wondering if there is a sample somewhere. My other question has to do with the NADAC exam requirement, and if that applies to CAC 3s or the LAC.
Thank you.
Sarah, this is Karen. If you look at the last rule, and I think Elena has it up on the screen, that's the rule about the disclosures, and we included a sample disclosure in the appendix.
Okay.
Okay. And then as far as the testing, I think that we can make sure that that's clarified in the rule. I don't see that it is, but we can put a note on there to clarify that.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Let me look for another person. Bear with me. Jessica Alfaro. Jessica?
Can you hear me?
Jessica? Yep, we can hear you now.
Okay, so I had typed in my question into the bar, but it currently says I'm a CAC 3 with a master's degree, and currently I'm, as what it says, a certified addiction specialist. So what is, I guess this kind of goes to that grandfathering piece, but is that going to be the same level of someone who has a CAC 2 with no degree? Are they separating those two pieces out in the specialist form, or are they all going to be on the same level?
So I think that's something that we can put forth to the board, but I think looking at the bill may be helpful in how the bill defines the specialist from the technician and if the specialist is divided.
Okay. Did you have anything further, Jessica?
No, I think that's it.
All right, thank you. Jade Werner? Jade? Looks like you might be self-muted still. Jade?
Hi, yes, my name is Jade, and I have a CAC 3 with a master's degree. And one of my questions is that prior to this law coming into effect, I could have took my MAC exam and turned in my transcript and had my CAC 3 transferred to a LAC. And my question is that going to still be the same? And if not, I have concerns because the majority of us with the CAC 3, we completed 5,000 hours in the field and we took every single OBH required class, which is a higher requirement than if I had waited for my master's degree.
Okay. Again, we can't really give specific advice on specific circumstances, but it's something that I will definitely put in for the board to consider.
Okay, thank you. And I work with a lot of people with a master's degree with the CAC 3 that would be affected by this.
Okay.
Thank you. James Ryan Kennedy? James? James? Your line is unmuted if you'd like to speak. You
Hi,
might want
this
to
is
check
Ryan.
your, there you go. Go ahead.
Do you hear me? Yeah.
Yes,
So I do several training and certification classes for people working toward their CAC and LAC. Here's my question. First, I have two questions. Is there still going to be what's known as Pathway 1 and Pathway 2? It sounds like those two pathways have been reduced to no pathways. There's just one pathway. So that's question number one. And then question number two is, for people who had been on Pathway 2 who did not want to go through Pathway 1, CAC 1, 2, 3, they needed to be registered or certified or somehow in the DORA database while they were working toward their credential, or they couldn't count their accrual of work hours. So this is related to work experience. Now we have what looks like a candidate status, but my understanding of candidate status is that someone can't get the candidate status until they are close to graduating. So my question is, how will somebody be working toward those work experience hour accrual if they don't have a mechanism other than the unlicensed psychotherapist? How do we help people get connected to the addiction counselor board who are working toward their LAC, but who don't have their clinical master's degree yet, but will have it by the time they apply? Because there has been a mechanism for that in the past.
Okay, and that's something that we can put forward for the board. We appreciate your feedback.
You're quite welcome.
Okay, I think we are going to, I know there may still be some hands raised, but we're at 3:45. We're going to move on to marriage and family therapists, and we will save time at the end to get back to anyone else who still has feedback or comments on the rules.
Okay, thank you. If anyone has questions that were about addiction counselors, it'd be helpful if you could lower your hand for the time being. If you have questions about the next program, which I believe Karen just said was marriage and family therapist, go ahead and raise your hand. Otherwise, again, feel free to send questions in. We're getting quite a few, and those will be included in the information provided to the board as well. So feel free to send questions that way too. So does that work, Karen? We can start the next one.
Yep. So for marriage and family therapists, aside from the general changes that we discussed, the change to marriage and family therapists is that the clinical supervision has been defined, and the requirements for clinical supervision were defined. And again, the mode of supervision was clarified to include telesupervision or virtual supervision. And so now we can take comments on any changes to the marriage and family therapy rules.
Okay, thanks. All right, so I'm gonna look for folks who have their hand raised in regards to these marriage and family therapy rules. Bridget Bauer-Cummins. Bridget? Your hand is raised. Are you able to speak, Bridget? If not, we can come back to you. Bridget? Okay, feel free also again to send your comments via the questions pane, and we will be sure to include that in the information we provide the board. Dawn Dino? Dawn?
That's Deanno, and it's actually a general, yeah, sorry, it's a general comment that's not marriage and family related.
Okay.
Would you like me to hold that?
No, you can go ahead since you're on the line.
Okay, and so it was a curiosity, and I'll just state it the way that I wrote it, is it possible to create a different title or term for graduates of master's programs that are in the process of obtaining the LPCC status that currently were registered psychotherapists and now considered unlicensed psychotherapists. And I understand that the unlicensed psychotherapist makes sense for those that don't have a master's in a counseling program and no training. But many of us have endured a 3-year training program, and perhaps a different title would be more appropriate and accurate for us. So I'm just curious about the choice of that unlicensed status. And there's some of us that fall in kind of a gray area.
So are you referencing the changes in the statute under the formerly registered psychotherapist rules or the licensed professional counselor rules or statute?
I'm not sure, to be honest, but it's, I mean, in regards to registered psychotherapist being changed to unlicensed psychotherapist.
Okay, so the board can't create license types or change titles, but it is definitely something that I can include in the feedback to the board, and that would likely go to the unlicensed psychotherapy board.
Okay, yeah, that would be helpful. I think that there's maybe not a large population, but there is a population that I think was overlooked or is now caught in kind of a predicament, like many here. Thank you.
Thank you for your feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm probably going to mispronounce this name. I apologize in advance. Devaney Oberview? Devaney?
I put my question in the chat when we switched over to the LMFT, so.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, let me find another person with their hand raised. We have Gustav Moen. Gustav? Oh, your hand went down. Thank you. Hannah Dudley. Hannah?
Yes, hi.
Go ahead.
2 questions. One, thank you for answering and clarifying about the difference between the bill and the rules. I looked on the website and there's the current rules, but not these redlined versions, and I can't seem to find that in my email either. So I'm wondering how we can access those so we can clarify our questions better. That's one piece. And then the other piece is I would really encourage the board to consider the ability to have an application for extension and or renewal to the MFTC, because with the change to unlicensed psychotherapists no longer being an option, if someone doesn't reach licensure status in 4 years, which can be very common given the extent of direct relational and just direct clinical hours needed, as well as life circumstances happening. Right now, they have no option, and people are facing the expiration of their candidacy right now, and basically are, I guess, SOL. They're not really sure what to do.
Thank you, Hannah. I believe, and Elena, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, the draft rules were posted on each board's website under the public notice section. Is that correct?
Okay, I will look at that. Thank you.
I believe so.
And then thank you for your comment, Hannah, regarding the your other comment regarding marriage and family therapist. That will be included for the board.
Okay, excellent.
Okay, next we have Jeffrey Mitchell. Jeffrey? Jeffrey, your line is self-muted, as unmuted you on our end. If you'd like to speak, go ahead and unmute your phone or your computer. Jeffrey? Jeffrey? Okay, we'll come back. Joanna Karasek, apologies for the name pronunciation. Johanna? Your hand went down. Thank you. Sandy McFall. Sandy?
So this was
Oh, your hand went.
this was a
Okay,
a
your
question
hand
for
went
the
down.
addiction.
I see. Okay, thank you. You can go ahead and send any questions via the questions pane. Otherwise, we can circle back at the end, as Karen mentioned, if we have time. Thank you.
We'll do it.
Cecile Contreras. I apologize for the pronunciation. Cecile. You're self-muted. If you'd like to speak, go ahead and unmute your line.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you so much.
Go ahead.
Yeah, my question is, what happens to the candidates in the MFTC track that are close to ours, but their time expires before the end of the year?
So I don't think that there was a change in the statute that would change the status quo on that, but that's something that we'll certainly take to the board.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, let me start back up at the top. Bear with me. Let's see if anybody new who hasn't had their hand raised. Otherwise, there's a few folks we had some technical problems with that we'll check back with. All right. Bridget Ballard Cummins. Bridget, did you have a comment on marriage and family therapist? Bridget? Okay. We still can't hear you, so feel free to send something via the questions pane, and that will be included.
Hi, Laura. It's Elena. It looks like we have a Miss Mita Johnson. I'm not quite sure if you called her already.
I had called her, I think, earlier, so I was just going to, I can get back to her now. Let me get there.
Oh, okay.
Mita. Yep. I was just making sure everyone had a first chance to speak first. All right. Mita, go ahead.
I don't have a marriage and family question. Thank you.
Oh, okay, thank you. Okay, let's see who else. I know there were a few we had technical problems with. We'll circle back. Jeffrey Mitchell, were you able to fix your audio, Jeffrey? Jeffrey Mitchell?
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, Jeffrey and I are here together. My name's Yvonne, and I'm in courses now to be a CAC 2, and I only have 2 left. But with all of these changes, I guess I'm still not sure how that's gonna. Does that change whether or not I can teach groups? Is there a way that I'm just kind of still confused about how that works?
So we had moved on from the CAC questions, but what I can tell you is that we will, if you will submit your question in the question box, I can get back to you offline.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. I was in an appointment and I just was able to join in now.
That's okay. No worries.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Hannah Dudley, is your hand raised again? Hannah? You're self-muted?
Sorry. No, that was a mistake. I can't tell which is up or down. My apologies.
No worries. Okay, thank you. All right. Lori, you had your hand raised, Lori Braden. Did you have a comment? Nope. Okay. Okay. I don't see anyone else, I don't think. I did see a question, just a general question in the questions pane regarding this recording. And yes, this recording will be posted. Correct, Elena?
Yes, this will be posted by tomorrow, by the end of the day.
Okay. And it'll be posted on each board's page, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
Okay.
great.
So if you guys, we can move on to licensed professional counselors.
Yes. Let's move on to LPC. And for the licensed professional counselor changes to the Mental Health Practices Act, it clarifies the requirements for licensed professional counselor applicants. And it clarifies and defines clinical supervision and requirements for supervision, as well as the mode of supervision, again, including virtual and telesupervision. So we can put those rules up and take comments or feedback on the rules for professional counselors.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm going to go and start calling names. Allison Festa. Allison, you're unmuted.
Thank you. Yeah, so my question is kind of related to the LPC change and also the unlicensed psychotherapist, because I'm representing Europa University, and our students currently, one of our biggest concerns is that when they graduate, they have to get their education approved by the CCE, and therefore there's a delay in them being able to get the LPCC. And so one of our biggest concerns that we want to advocate for is around that gap, because they're not able to work and they're not able to get licensed. So again, more of a concern than a question. And then I also had a question or kind of a concern about the new supervision requirement, the LPCS. We're curious for our students if that's going to be applicable to not only postgraduate hours, but also pre-graduate hours. So for our practicum and internship students in the counseling program, will they also be required to have an LPCS as a supervisor? And if so, how will that implementation happen? Like, will there be a grace period for the supervisors to get the training? So those are kind of the two big pieces that Naropa wanted to advocate about.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And that's something that we can put forward to the board and get some clarity on those issues. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, we have Amanda Laughlin. Amanda, you're still self-muted. If you'd like to speak, go ahead.
Hi, are you able to hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes.
Great. So I had a question about folks who are currently LPCCs that are accruing hours for licensure. With the new licensure change now requiring 1,500 of those hours to be direct client contact, I know for myself and many of my peers who are also LPCCs, this is going to greatly impact our ability to get licensed, shortly after the 2 years hour accrual. And I'm curious, is this taking impact right now for folks who are accruing hours, just because we are currently experiencing an economic recession and there's actually a pretty high demand for folks who are fully licensed clinicians to go out and work with people during this time of unprecedented mental health needs. So I guess my question is, does this impact folks who are currently LPCCs accruing hours? And if so, can folks who were accruing hours before the bill was signed on the 14th have, some ability to be grandfathered into the previous hours requirement?
So as I think I stated this a little bit earlier with another stakeholder, is that the board is certainly, we'll pass your feedback on to the board for the board to consider, always making sure that we all keep in mind that the board's authority is only within the rules. They can clarify the rules, but they can clarify the statute, but they can't change it. So I think what's important to remember is that this bill has become law. And so the board's ability now is to clarify that law for people. I can't speak for what their authority, for what they are able to do, but can certainly give them your feedback so that they can look at that issue for you.
Okay, so this hours change it is currently impacting folks who are LPCCs, or is that sort of being still uncovered and decided when it will definitively occur?
The law went into effect on July 14th. And so, you know, I know that the board will do whatever is in their authority to assist people, and they'll have to determine what that is when they look at these rules and consider feedback.
Okay, thank you.
Hello? My computer just, hi. So, so I'm looking at the bill now, and then I'm noticing some language that is potentially restrictive. And so I would suggest that the board clarify that rule. And so I'm looking at section 30. Let's see, number 2, it talks about face-to-face hours requiring 100 or 1,500 face-to-face direct hours with clients. And so I just think that's potentially restrictive given that telehealth is such a huge thing right now. And so I would give feedback to the board to clarify that language.
Okay. Appreciate that. I think, yeah, I think the board can look at that and determine what face-to-face means in the current circumstance. I do think that in-person has been clarified with telesupervision and with virtual throughout, and so there may be some room there.
Okay, thank you.
Hello? Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. So this isn't a question regarding the law, I'm sorry. I did just want to bring to your attention, if you could bring it to the board, several of us had applied for a scholarship that we were granted to fulfill for CAC CAP 1 or 2. And now we will not be able to fulfill that contract due to the new laws. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Okay, thank you. Elena, have we lost Laura?
I think so.
No, I'm right here.
No, she's here. Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Okay. Sure. Sorry, my phone was cutting off for a second there, but I'm back.
Okay. All right. So do we have anyone else who has comments for professional counselors?
Looks like we do. Elizabeth Boggin?
Yes, hi. I apologize if you guys already addressed this, but I'm wondering if those who are unlicensed psychotherapists will be able to still practice under the supervision of a licensed counselor or social worker in that gap period between the time from when they graduate until when they're approved by the board as an LPCC.
Okay, that's something that we can pose for the board. I appreciate that. You raising that, and we'll certainly put that in front of them.
Okay, thank you so much.
It looks like we have a Hannah Dudley that has her hand raised. I'll go ahead and unmute her line.
Yep.
Oh, it looks like she may be
Looks like she's self-muted.
muted. Okay.
Her hand went down. We have a Greg Elliott. Greg Elliott?
Yep, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yep.
I had 2 comments / questions. One is a comment similar to what Hannah made for the Marriage and Family Therapy Board, which is I think we need a mechanism for extending or renewing the LPCC, just like they do for the candidate status in marriage and family therapy, given that there's no option for unlicensed psychotherapists moving forward. So if due to life circumstances, someone can't complete the requirements for licensure during their LPCC time period, they need some mechanism for being able to extend that or renew it. comment slash question is, I think the legislation did make reference to an LPCS and LPC supervisor, but for the life of me, I don't see that addressed or defined anywhere in the document. So, but I could be missing it. Can you direct me to where that's discussed in the document that you're in?
In the current rules?
Yes.
And let me just be clear, so I'd have to search through the document. You are wondering where, can you repeat that, please?
Yes, I believe as the law was passed that it made reference to a new designation of a licensed professional counselor supervisor. And I'm wondering where in the rules it defines what a licensed professional counselor supervisor is going to be, what education or experience is going to be required in order to gain that designation as an LPCS.
So I think that that's something that the board needs to address in the rules. You know, everything in the statute isn't in the rules, but if that's something that you would like the board to clarify, we can certainly add that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, Hannah, looks like your hand is back up. Hannah, can you go ahead and speak?
Yep. It was the
Okay,
same thing, just worded, and he worded it much better than I was. It's about the fact that the LPCC and the MFTC needs a recourse option. Could, for whatever reasons, they not be able to meet their license requirements in the 4 years one-time candidacy registration, because the registered psychotherapist, which is now unregistered psychotherapist and inaccessible to anyone new, used to be the recourse option for people to still work towards licensure. And now essentially, if their MFTC or LPC expires, basically they are asked Dora and had not received a reply that their career in mental health in Colorado is essentially over at this point. It's really unclear where they're supposed to go.
And I appreciate that, Hannah, and you know, we've put it down in a couple of places to talk to the boards about that. But again, the law went into effect on the 14th and it's July 30th, and we really are moving as quickly as we can to get everyone the answers they need and to get this information before the boards so that they can make a determination.
We appreciate that. We're just, you know, advocating and making sure it's being thought through.
Absolutely appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you. Let me find the next person. Lexi Ellis. Lexi, you're self-muted. Lexi, if you'd like to speak, go ahead and unmute your line. Okay, your hand went down. Linda Burdick. Linda?
Hi, thank you. And I had typed it in the thing too. So I just wanted to clarify, those of us that are already LPCs and have already renewed the one time, nothing is changing for us, the next renewal, which will be next year.
Yeah, the changes, you know, that I talked about in the bill, they're the general changes for all mental health professionals. And then the changes specific to LPC have to do with supervision and the requirements for supervision.
Okay, yeah, that's what I had read,
So
that is for those of us that are already LPCs, we're good to go.
Right, right.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me keep going down our list. Rebecca Wallish. Rebecca?
Sorry, did not have a question.
Okay, thank you. Ryan Burkhart.
Hi,
Ryan?
thank you. My name is Dr. Ryan Burkhart. I'm the Executive Director of the Colorado Counseling Association. I first just want to thank you, Dora, so much. We worked with you guys pretty closely in the last 2.5 years to get the Sunset Act kind of moving. I just want to say I appreciate Dora's collaborative efforts in the last 2.5 years. I also want to say that I know you guys are in a tough spot. When we were creating HB 2012-06, we did not intend for many of this to go into effect immediately. It's unfortunate that the dice kind of rolled out that way, but I understand. I also just want to highlight the last comment from Linda Burdick in regards to the LPC. There actually will be a change for the LPC in my understanding, and that is the LPCS. So I want to talk about real quick Rule 1.7.d on page 6 of the document that you have up. Really, when you look at the bill does mention LPCS. We've already talked about this. I'm not going to talk about it too much further, but I do make a strong recommendation to the board that they move on the LPCS as soon as possible, because as the law was passed on the 14th, LPCs, according to the law, can no longer provide clinical supervision to an LPCC moving towards licensure. So getting the LPCS in place and the requirements of an LPCS in place as soon as possible is going to be very important, because as the law reads right now, since it went into effect immediately, which was not our intention, LPCs can no longer provide clinical supervision to an LPCC towards licensure. So that recommendation around the LPCS also would be a suggestion of when they are creating the rules, the LPCS is applied to students in master programs. So basically any student or LPCC who's receiving supervision would need to be supervised by an LPCS or an LCSW, a LAC, an LMFT, or a licensed psychologist. The other one is in regards to Rule 1.14C4B on page 16. I think we've echoed this, but I again just want to stress this. LPCCs have not been working towards this model of a breakdown of 75 and a 25% between direct and indirect hours. If I may make a suggestion in towards the rules, I would suggest that the board adopt KCREP's definition of direct hours and KCREP's definition of indirect hours. This is largely where the concept of direct and indirect hours is coming from. But I also understand the board has to work within the parameters of the bill, and I completely understand that. If it is within their purview to basically say all hours earned before July 14th fall under the old way of doing things, hours that were begun being earned after July 14th fall under the 25-75% split, that would be great. And then again, I also just want to highlight the need for an extension or renewal period for the LPCC.
Okay.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you're very welcome. And CCA is looking forward to partnering with Dora in the Sunrise process in any way that we possibly can.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next up we have Sandy McFall. Sandy, you're unmuted.
No question
Sandy?
about this. I'm
No?
unmuted.
Okay.
No question about this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So Laura, I think we're going to move on. And then again, we'll try to come back at the end to pick up anybody that we've missed.
Okay.
So let's move on to psychologists. And for psychologists, of course, all the general provisions will affect psychology. And then there is a new requirement that applicants for their initial psychology licensure must complete a name-based criminal history record check. So let's go ahead and take a look at those rules.
Thank you, Karen. So again, if you have a question about a previous profession, if you could go ahead and lower your hand, but if you have a question about psychologists at this time, go ahead and raise your hand, or a comment, I should say, not a question necessarily. Please go ahead and raise your hand and we will unmute your line or send a comment in the questions pane and we'll get to you. Let's see. Shannon Dunnan. Shannon, your hand is raised.
Yeah, I'm an LPC, and I was hopefully looking for them to clarify that LPCS designation and to allow us to know what we need to do in order to get that designation. I mean, I'm an LPC and was able to supervise until this law came out. And so as I move forward to reestablish my ability to supervise, I'd like to know what I can do.
Okay, thank you.
And if there would be possible, I don't know if there's a possible, I know they have to do within the scope of the law. I've heard that said several times already. But if there's a way within the scope of that law for them to allow us at our LPCs a grace period, if it's 6 months or something like that, in order to continue to supervise until we are credentialed to supervise, that would be helpful too.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any feedback on the psychologist rules, which again will include the Senate Bill 120, which is the disclosure of previous discipline or conviction for sexual misconduct, or the changes related to the name-based criminal history check?
We have a hand raised from Leonard Tamura. Leonard, did you want to speak?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, just a real quick question. Rule 1.12 C2D. You eliminate misdemeanor or felony, so I don't understand how it says reported any applicable convictions. It kind of seems like it renders that rule meaningless. I mean, what is an applicable conviction?
Okay.
So, yeah. So we can talk to the, we can give your feedback to the board, but the statute sets out what what convictions need to be reported. But we can put that in to make it more clear.
Yeah, I looked for that in the statute. Maybe I just missed it. I didn't see anything that was defined. So, okay, all right.
I apologize. This is Elena. He was referring to Rule 1.22. Is that correct?
Well, in my version, it says 1.12 C2D.
Okay, Laura, who do we have next?
Okay. Oh, I see.
Okay, thank you. Next we have, let's see, Bridget Ballard-Cummins. Bridget? We've had technical issues there before. Again, feel free to send your comments or questions via the questions pane for the board to consider. Bob Lang. Bob?
So I only received the rules and the law for the CAC changes, or the Certified Addictions Technician and Certified Addictions Specialist. I'm wondering if you can provide us a link to all the other laws that are going in, or that have gone into effect, so that we can disperse those out to individuals we're working with.
If you go to our website, you can go to our, I can send a link out to stakeholders, but if you go to our website, you can find our legislative implementation page that discusses all the bills that are being implemented at this time.
What is the webpage?
I will have to get it to you at the end, because I'll have to reach out and have someone send it to me.
Awesome, thanks.
Thank you. I'm not seeing, oh, here's another hand. Pamela Traylor. Pamela, did you have a comment or a question? Pamela? You're self-muted right now, so nope, your hand went down.
Okay. All right, well, we can move on to social work. Okay. So let's talk about social workers. The new law creates a clinical social worker candidate status. Again, it clarifies and defines clinical supervision and the requirements for supervision, as well as allows for telesupervision and virtual as a mode. This bill does specifically talk about the 2 years of clinical supervision required for licensure may now be completed by virtual or in-person supervision by an LCSW or another person with equivalent experience as determined by the board, and then clarifies that the coursework provided by an accredited educational institution or recognized professional organization is the only continuing competency activity that on its own fully satisfies the continued competency requirements for LCSWs and LSWs. So let's look at the rules and then take comments for social workers.
All right. Sandy McFall, your hand is raised. Sandy? Sandy, do you have a comment? Sandy? Okay, I can't hear anybody, so I'm going to go ahead and mute that line again. Feel free to send your comment or question in writing, and we will be sure it's passed on to the board. Michael Ruttenberg. Michael, did you have a comment about social work?
Yes, I did. My comment is in regards to 1.14, I believe, then 3A3. I'm hoping that the board will provide some more direction in regards to other person with equivalent experience as determined by the board. I think that's a pretty vague statement that could lead to confusion and or frustration for folks working towards licensure not under an LCS.
Yes, and I appreciate that. And I do think that's something that the board is working to define. I'm wondering if you have any specific feedback on what you'd like to see.
I don't have any specific feedback. I think I made a comment in the questions box as well that there's a couple other fields that take a systemic perspective. That's typically what I hear, is that social workers are the only ones to take a systemic perspective to the work, which is simply inaccurate. And I am excited about this possibility for folks, and I just hope that there is a clear definition of what is being looked for.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Kevin Bishop. Kevin, your line is unmuted.
Hi, thanks, and just in time for my kids to interrupt, but I'll do my best. Thanks so much for taking my question. My question was in regards to 1.14C4C2 about the candidate status, and I've noticed that the proposed changes for the candidate status later on there's nothing there, it's blank. And so one, I was curious about how to offer feedback or what about that blank portion, but also in my reading of this rule, it appears that only someone who has applied towards the LCSW test and is working towards it will have those experience hours counted. And so I'm trying to understand about what to do with LSWs who, are working on their hours and at some later date may want to get their LCSW. Do they fall into that? And what's the process for registering as a clinical social worker candidate? And then that area is blank on the rules. So
sure.
Clarification about that.
Absolutely. And so we left that blank. It's a placeholder because, again, the board's working on those, but we were hoping in this early stakeholder engagement, if people had ideas, we could include that when we meet, we circle back with the board.
Yeah, I mean, I know of folks who have their MSW who are what up until the law was passed were registered psychotherapists. And we assumed that those supervision hours were counting towards their licensure. And so I feel like they're kind of hanging out there. And then also the people who have the LSW who've been working on this whole time, but maybe haven't applied to take the test or they definitely have that in mind, but they started at the LSW level. Now, what's going to happen with them, at least during this period between July 14th and the future until it gets, figured out, The only other question, and I'm sorry for the length of this, but is about the continuing competence. And I wanted to just clarify about the coursework. It does say, if I understand the reading of the law, that only an accredited university, or I assume NASW would be the only other locally recognized entity that could approve of a training, will count for the coursework. And then again, during the coursework piece or the continuing professional development piece, I don't see any edits at all to the rules. And so more clarification around what the process is for being an organization or an agency that can, you know, signify that these credits count. Currently, our agency, as a state agency, does offer credits. And so I'm concerned that we might lose that ability, and or that we would then have to go to one of two places to get our credits, basically. And that's
okay.
it.
No, I appreciate that, and that's helpful. We will make sure that the board gets that and takes that into consideration when we're working through these rules.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any way to have further feedback on that in the future? I know the board works kind of quietly, but
sure. So the board does work in open session, but we intend on having future stakeholder meetings as soon as we get a more complete draft. This is just a very early draft to try to put it out there and get people's feedback.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Leanne Rupp. Leanne, your hand is raised. You're unmuted. Leanne?
Hi. Yep. Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Great. Thank you guys so much for holding this session and taking input today. I think that NASW's executive director is also on this call, and so I'm going to leave some questions for Heather to ask that she has notes on, but one in particular that we wanted to highlight, which it sounds like the last person who spoke was pointing out as well, is that there don't appear to be any changes in this proposed rule draft around the change that was made in the Sunset Bill related to allowing someone to accrue up to 40 hours of continuing professional development and coursework. That specific reference point is 1.18E2. It's on page 19 in the proposed rule. And that's where we would like to see the change, just to clarify that now someone may earn up to 40 hours CPD and coursework. We didn't have any specific suggestions during the sunset input process in terms of changing the definition of coursework, since that's already defined elsewhere in statute and in the CPD language. So there's no, to put it out there, there's no intention, at least from the stakeholders that participated in the development of these sunset changes for social workers, to change or modify the definition of coursework as it currently stands for CPD. But it was simply to allow somebody to accrue more than the 20-hour cap that was previously in place. So we want to make sure that that gets addressed. And then we had some other questions and input regarding candidate status development and things of that nature. I will highlight that our intention in developing the candidate status for social workers was to have it essentially mirror the candidate statuses that exist for the other mental health professional groups already, the psychologists, LMFTs, and LPCs. And so you can certainly include that in your notes as far as recommendations are concerned. That was the intent, so that we didn't have to sort of reinvent the wheel, but so that we could create a space for social workers who previously would have registered as registered psychotherapists, now unlicensed psychotherapists, to essentially sit and accrue those hours without having to first test and pass a national exam. So for those who've commented on this call thus far today about the concerns related to, stopping the registration in that now termed unlicensed psychotherapist category. I will just point out that folks that were already registered in that category as registered psychotherapists can continue to practice in that arena and as psychotherapists under that designation, now called unlicensed psychotherapist. Moving forward, you just simply can't pursue new registration to that category as of the 14th of July when the bill was signed.
So, and I appreciate that. Do you have any more comments about the social worker roles?
Nope, I think that's it. I'll leave the rest to Heather. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And Laura, did you want to call on
have-
Heather now?
Yeah, I was looking for her name. Scroll right there. It is. Heather McLaughlin. Heather, you're unmuted. Heather, you're self-muted. There you go.
Yeah, no, can
Yep.
you hear me? Okay. Thanks. I think, first of all, I just want to say thanks so much for the opportunities to participate in stakeholder processes. We always really appreciate it. I also really want to thank Dora for the opportunity to have collaborated during the sunset process for the development of HB 1206 and also in its early implementation phases. I want to specifically thank Wendy Anderson, who's Dora's staff, and also Director Ronnie Hines. They've been really helpful in our ability to share information about the quick turnaround and the changes that have already taken place and get that information out to students and schools and especially early career professionals and more seasoned professionals. So we really appreciate that. And I would just like to sort of echo some of what Kevin Bishop said. And Kevin, I'm really happy to talk with you further about your questions, but certainly understand where you're coming from and appreciate those comments. And also, yes, Leanne, who was the chair of our Sunset Committee. So in addition, the candidate status, right, it's not fleshed out in here, but it is, well defined in statute. Again, our intention was to parallel what the other professions have. One thing that I do want to call attention to is this issue that allows for candidate status, that allows those in either candidate or as LSWs, if they show good cause or that they can ask the board at its discretion to be granted an extension. So the period to receive clinical supervision hours needs to be 4 years under candidate status because that's what it is elsewhere. And as an LSW, 5 years, and that's typically what the board grants for accrual of all those clinical supervision hours for social workers is 5 years. We just want to underscore that we do want to allow for those who need to request to the board to be granted extensions, especially those during periods of unemployment such as COVID and those who are working part-time and so forth, that option exists. And we feel very strongly that the board look to that option as a way to make those extensions when needed. We don't know, I haven't specifically asked about this, but we have been getting questions about can people who are currently unlicensed psychotherapists who want to now move over to this candidate status designation, if they do that application, could they do that without having to pay an additional fee? Anywhere that we can streamline and minimize additional fees, we would just like to say that that is always a goal for us. There is something I want to call your attention to that is, this is all 1.14, and this is B, education and training requirements, number 1, accredited program. I have replied to a letter that was submitted by UCCS about schools such as UCCS, and I believe perhaps CSU Pueblo, that are in the process of receiving their CSWE candidacy. That's a candidacy status, not the candidate status we were just talking about, but the candidacy status with the Council of Social Work Education. We would love to see those graduates be able to have opportunities to earn their clinical supervision hours, so long as ultimately those programs receive their full accreditation. So I just want to say NASW is very much in support of that. I've been talking with Dr. Simmons at UCCS about that, and really happy to continue that dialogue, but there is a letter to you all about that. Okay. As far as the equivalent experience about the non-LCSW supervisors, and Karen, I'd really like to thank you for directing the board to, work on establishing what these criteria are. I will say that NASW will give that. I will be submitting in writing some suggestions around that. We also, of course, want to point out that our initial way of resolving this issue is that we allow 100% telesupervision for all clinical hours for anybody that is trying to get their LCSW. So 100% of those hours can be telesupervised by an LCSW, and that is a change. So we think that, and that is a change that we advocated for in this new, in HB 1206, so it's now part of statute. So we would think that those exceptions would be rare, but we do see situations like military overseas and others where that, oh, am I talking too much? Where that might be necessary.
Oh, no. I just wanted to break in and say, I just wanted to clarify that the statute does not say 100% telesupervision. You're just saying that that's what you do, correct?
Yes. It does say all hours, all supervision hours. So it doesn't say 100%, but it says that all hours, there is no limit to how many of the hours can be through telesupervision.
Okay.
Yeah. So now that full telesupervision can be accessed, that it doesn't say specifically 100%, but it doesn't say that there's any limit to it. We feel really strongly that around the state, there are LCSWs that can be accessed through telesupervision, but we will also be giving input about that more specifically, and we're happy to talk with you, at any point when the board has questions or anybody does, from DORA, but we will be providing additional input there. And also just want to call out that in statute, it does say in 12-245-404C, which that a supervisor's practice includes training and work experience in the area of clinical social work. So I think there's opportunity to continue that dialogue. And then along with what Kevin and Leanne had just talked about relative to Rule 1.18, the continuing professional competence, that there wasn't anything in the rules draft, but I'm sure you'll take care of that. Yes, our intention was really to expand the opportunity for people to go to a course and earn that. It definitely does not say that it has to be approved by NASW. It says an accredited educational institution, so that could be we would like that to be viewed as very broad, or a nationally or regionally recognized professional organization. And we think there's a lot of room to define what professional organization means, and are happy to talk so that can be interpreted in ways that can work for state agencies and so forth. So we just wanted to mention that. And that's it. Thank you so much. Oh, go ahead, Karen. Yeah, thank you very much.
I appreciate your comments. And if you have anything else, certainly feel free to include that in writing. And I don't mean to cut you off, but we have 18 minutes left, and we still have to get to unlicensed psychotherapists.
Yep, that's it. Thank you so much.
So thank you. So let's transition on to the unlicensed psychotherapist. There's a lot of changes there that I want to address. Let me switch my screen here. And while I'm switching my screen, I can give you that website that has all our legislation on it. The website is dpo.colorado.gov/legislation 2020. And that will have the bills and a bill summary for all the legislation that impacts licensees of DORA. And then if you're looking for any of the mental health rules, you just need to go to the mental health, to the, either the addiction counselor, social worker webpage, and click on public notices, and the notice will have the rules attached. And let's move on to unlicensed psychotherapists. So unlicensed psychotherapists, which were previously registered psychotherapists, there were changes related to the regulation, which include changing the title from registered psychotherapist to unlicensed psychotherapist for all psychotherapists on the registry as of the signing of the bill, which was July 14th. The new bill requires any mental health professional not otherwise licensed, certified, or registered under the Mental Health Practice Act to register with the board before the effective date of the bill, discontinuing new registrations after the effective date of the bill. So essentially, if we did not have your application to be registered as an unlicensed psychotherapist by July 14th, we will be unable to grant any new registrations for unlicensed psychotherapists. It does go ahead and define clinical supervision and requirements and does allow telesupervision and virtual for the unlicensed psychotherapists remaining on the registry. And it requires applicants, and that was moving on to the next field. So that is it for unlicensed psychotherapists. So we can go ahead and look at the rules and take feedback.
Okay, I'll start at the top and call on folks. Bob Lang, your hand is raised. Do you have a comment about psychotherapist?
Yeah, I was just curious if, because I know it was mentioned earlier, if you can send out a list of the dates and times of all the professional boards and when they're meeting, so that we have the ability to attend those in the future.
I wouldn't be able to send those all out, but they all board meetings are listed on the board website, on the board calendar, on the very first page. If you just go down, all their meetings are set on their calendars.
Okay, and then do they have designation for how to participate in those meetings?
Absolutely. When you click on the link, it will give you the webinar link so you can register.
Great, thank you so much.
Do we have anybody else, Laura? Looks like we have Heather McLaughlin. Looks like you're self-muted. Did you want to?
Oh, nope. Nope, my hand should be down. Sorry about that.
Okay, no worries. I think Laura might have cut out again. So
I'm back.
Are you there, Laura?
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, my phone was having issues. Gabrielle Numer. You're self-muted. Gabrielle, would you like to speak?
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me? Yes, thank you.
Yes.
So I have a master's degree and halfway did my hours, and I've been, but didn't, anyway, lots of reasons why I didn't get to finish my hours and get licensed. So I've been a registered psychotherapist for many years, took a break, and I got it back in March. So we're good to go. Like, we're not going to get kicked out, I guess is what I want to say, as long as we keep everything kosher and all our dots and everything.
So essentially what the new law says is so long as you were on the registry on July 14th, or your application was submitted to be on the registry by July 14th, then you can maintain your spot on the registry so long as you timely renew your license.
Okay. Can you tell me, do you know why this was changed?
I don't have any idea.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Gina DiNola. Gina?
Yes, hello.
Gina, would you have a comment?
Thank you for taking my questions. So I'm looking at the proposals. I am an MSW graduate, registered psychotherapist, now unlicensed psychotherapist. Can I continue, based on this, can I continue to use my hours as a registered or unlicensed psychotherapist towards my clinical license?
I can go ahead and put that forward to the board, but I don't see anything in the new statute that precludes that or changes that.
Well, and I want to make that clear I've not, because that was told to me by Miss D at the office, D Shalafu, and so that is how I've been doing my clinical hours. Another question also on page 6, I think it's 6 or page 7, where it says that let's see, let me go to my questions here real quick. As a registered psychotherapist, it says if the mental health is an unlicensed psychotherapist, I can only go by the title of unlicensed psychotherapist, or can I use social work?
Well, I can't, I think if you have individual questions, I would ask you to submit those to the mental health inbox so we can address your particular circumstance. The titles pertain to where you're licensed, how you're licensed. So if you're licensed as a social worker, then you can use the term social worker, but you'd have to abide by the provisions in the act. So I think it's better if we address that offline.
Yeah, because it says title use restrictions, but I'm also, would I be considered a candidate, or would I have to register as a candidate? So right now, I'm a registered unlicensed psychotherapist. Sorry, it's going to be a habit now. I'm an unlicensed psychotherapist, accruing my hours. Based on this, there's title use restrictions saying that I can only use whatever I'm registered or licensed. My question now is, it doesn't address if I can be considered a social work candidate. Or
So
do I
ma'am,
have to take
again,
that application?
So this meeting is to get feedback on the rules, and I understand you have questions about your particular circumstance, and I'm certainly happy to address those, and I can give out my email address at the end of this, but that's something that has to be addressed offline so that I can look at your licensure status and where you are in your education.
I'm looking at section 12 on page 7. I am addressing, the question is based on what's written here. I'm literally reading what's on page 7. 12-245-218. Title use restrictions, and then subsection A, it talks about social work candidate.
Exactly, but it depends on your certain circumstance if you're asking for advice about which title you can use. So I would have to figure out your particular circumstance.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. We're going to move on to the next person. The next person we have is Martha Uchinek. Martha? Your line is self-muted. If you have to speak, go ahead and unmute your line.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes. Wonderful, thank you. I've been a registered psychotherapist for like 25 years, and I understand that now I'm going to have to change the name to unlicensed. But my question is in regard to supervision. I do have a master's and I am working toward licensure, but I have all of these hours and supervision hours that fall in the old, by way of the old statute. So does that mean that if I were to meet with my supervisor now, that those hours wouldn't count toward my my licensure goal, because they have to be trained in a certain way? This is part that I don't really understand.
So that's something that we can have the board address. I don't believe that there was any intent for hours that people had previously accumulated not to count. So we'll work and make sure that's clarified in the rule.
And I guess the piece that maybe I'm not asking correctly is, moving on now, I have the same supervisor. And so I'm hearing that there's changes for their requirements to be able to supervise. So does that mean I have to find a new supervisor? You know, I guess that would be something to clarify in the rules as far as, you know, before and after July 14th, because,
Okay.
you know, we have established relationships with our supervisors.
Sure, and I understand that, and something that we will work, again, just for everybody's benefit, we are working as quickly and as rapidly as we can to get these issues clarified and to get information out there. We did not, we didn't, this time we didn't receive the benefit of an extended sort of implementation period, so we will definitely get this done as quickly as possible because we know that you're all looking for the information.
Well, thank you for your patience with all of our repeated questions and concerns about this. So
Sure.
thank you very
Sure,
much.
absolutely.
Thank you. Where do we stand on time, Karen or Elena?
We have
5 minutes.
So I can keep. Okay. I will
Yep.
move on to the next person. Patricia Jackson. Patricia Jackson.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. So to coattail on the question that the woman who just spoke had, so some of the people who are unlicensed psychotherapists, they are needing supervision to attain licensure for a different credential. Is there any supervisory requirement just for unlicensed psychotherapists in the change?
I don't.
Did I
Yeah,
make
I
myself
understand what you're
clear?
saying.
Okay.
Yeah. I understand what you. I don't see that, but definitely we'll put that out to the board to make sure that we take a triple look and make sure there's no change and clarify if there is.
Perfect. And then the other thing I wanted to ask is I'm finding this very helpful, this document that has the red lines, you know, the document you have in front of us. Is there any way that you could make that available to us after this meeting?
Yes, it is available if you go to the unlicensed psychotherapist website, our DORA website, and you click on public notice. You can download the notice that has these red line rules attached.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Patricia Martins. Patricia?
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you for taking my question. It's more of a comment. I wanted to bring something to the attention of the board. I think title changes are very important and they have a huge impact on us. And going from a registered psychotherapist to an unlicensed psychotherapist can be very confusing to clients. I think we deserve some sort of explanation or clarification as to why that title was changed, who had the input into changing that title, and in the future, how do stakeholders have more input into title changes? Because this is having a huge impact, I think, on a lot of people. So that's my feedback.
Sure. Okay. And I appreciate that, and I understand your frustration. I will just point out that the board did not make these changes. These changes were made over at the legislature.
Okay, well, yeah, that leads
so,
to my question. Yeah, who made them and why? And where can I access that?
I think you can look at, if you're interested, you can look at the legislative hearings on the General Assembly website for the Bill 1206, and you can listen to the hearings, and maybe that would give you some information about the changes that were made.
Thank you. One more quick question, because I know it's almost 5. You were talking about the title as it relates to also being related to what you're registered or licensed as. I assume that applies to everybody but a school psychologist. So a school psychologist can have a license in school psychology, but still can't refer to themselves as a school psychologist, because I'm still seeing a lot of that out there. And I think that also deserves some clarification. I still see people on websites and in publications referred to as school psychologists, And my understanding is unless you're practicing in a school, you're not allowed to call yourself that. You have to call yourself an unlicensed psychotherapist, even if your license is psychology. So I think that deserves some more clarification.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you. Do we have time for a couple
Okay,
more?
Yeah, let's do a couple more. We're at 4:59.
Okay, Patricia Summers. Patricia Summers.
Hi, thank you for taking my call. I'm currently a registered unlicensed psychotherapist in a graduate program for marriage and family therapy. I started an internship, had to stop, have moved into, I will begin a new internship this next month. And once I satisfy the number of hours that I need, it was my understanding that I could begin practicing because I had the registered psychotherapist until my application as an MFTC was approved. I am trying to find these documents online to answer the specific questions like this, and I'm not able to do that. I've been searching through this whole call, and as I'm going to these pages, I am not finding the link that you've described.
A link that describes what? I'm sorry, ma'am.
How to obtain these documents. I've got a copy of the rules, but I don't have a copy of the red lines. And
Okay,
I have
so
if but not the.
If you go to the unregistered psychotherapy website with Dora,
I'm on that page.
And you look, okay, go to public notices.
And public notices is not listed in the left-hand column or?
Down at the bottom of the page.
Okay. The only thing at the bottom of my page is, actually, I'm just going to copy down what you have because it is a different.
Okay, so I'm looking at the page right now. So there should be like 6 blue boxes at the top.
Yes.
And ma'am,
so scroll down, it'll say program information.
Mm-hmm.
And then there should be some blue bars, and there's one that says public notices.
Right.
If you click on that, and then it'll say attendance, a copy of the notice, and then it has a bunch of House bill numbers, and it says available for download. If you click on the word download,
okay,
you can get the notice. It should come up. And also, if you go down to the next bullet that says a copy of the draft rules, you can click on download, the word download there, and you'll get a copy of the draft rules to download.
Okay, thank you. I'm also concerned about that gap between graduation or satisfying my hours and being able to practice until candidacy comes through.
Okay, and that's definitely something we'll put before the board.
Thank you.
Okay.
I appreciate your help.
Oh, you wanted? Do we have anybody else, Laura?
We do. We still have a few more folks.
Okay.
Patty Meek.
So
Patty Meek.
Okay.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I just wanted to reinforce your previous person that as a school psychologist practicing outside of the schools, I really need some specific guidance. I know that now I'm referred to as an unlicensed psychotherapist, although I'm on the registry, but I'm especially concerned about guidelines for myself and how to refer to myself, particularly on a disclosure form. So I'd like to give that input to the board that school psychologists practicing outside of the schools, I have a doctorate, need specific guidance and also a sample disclosure form.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Do I keep going?
Yeah, go ahead. We'll do one more.
Okay. All right. So then last one is Rachel Meyer. Rachel?
Yes, thank you. I actually did put my question in the chat just in case. But similar to what other people are asking, I renewed my license last year, so I still have another year on it. And I would love some clarification if possible on how to refer to myself, but also does anything need to change on the actual license itself?
So could you clarify a little bit? I'm not sure I understand your question.
So obviously right now my license states registered psychotherapist, but with the new title of unlicensed, what does that entail as far as what's on my licensure itself?
So that won't require anything on your part as long as you are currently registered. And I'm sure as we work through implementation, you will likely see changes to your actual license, but something that we can clarify.
Okay, perfect. I would appreciate that.
Okay. So for everybody else online, we're going to go ahead and leave the webinar open for a few more minutes so you can type your questions in so we can make sure that we get everyone. Making sure that I'm going to go through and get you all some dates here for the people who are listening in. Elena, do you have those dates?
I do. I have the hearing dates. I do not have the board meeting dates.
Okay, why don't you go ahead and read the hearing dates?
Okay, sure thing. So the tentatively scheduled hearing dates for each board are as follows. The State Board of Addiction Counselor Examiners is on October 6th, 2020. The State Board of Marriage and Family Therapist Examiners is on October 23rd of this year. The State Board of Licensed Professional Counselor Examiners is on September 25th. The State Board of Psychologist Examiners is on October 2nd. The State Board of Unlicensed Psychotherapists is on October 16th. And the hearing for the State Board of Social Work Examiners is on September 18th, all in 2020.
And so for next steps for you folks, what we envision is speaking with the boards, going through these rules, getting a more comprehensive draft. We anticipate having a stakeholder meeting in August and then another stakeholder meeting in September so that we have time to look through the rules and make changes and make sure we incorporate everyone's feedback. So aside from that, we will always take written feedback, and you can send your written feedback in an email to Dora, D-O-R-A _ DPO _ rulemaking, all one word, at state.co.us. So if you think of things that you wanted to add, or if you didn't get the opportunity to speak, you can send an email, you can send a letter, you can send sample rules that you would like to see, and you can send all of those things to that email box, and we will make sure that the board gets them. Again, for anyone who wants to download a copy of the rules, if you go to your respective licensing board website, so whether that's the addiction counselors or social workers, and you go down to the blue bar that says public notice, there will be a notice talking about today's meeting, and the last bullet of that notice says you can download a copy of the rules, and you can click on the word download and you can get a copy of these red line rules. Keep a lookout in your emails, because when we are having, when we schedule the next 2 stakeholder meetings, we will be sending you a notice, and we always attach a copy of the red line rules to those emails so that you have a copy to look at before you come to the meeting. We really appreciate all of your attendance and your feedback and your questions. All of that information helps us come up with the most comprehensive set of rules possible so that we can make sure that as licensees, you get the guidance that you need moving forward. So thank you so much for coming.
Okay. Once again, yes, thank you for participating in today's stakeholder meeting, and we are going to end the webinar.